Jessica Acosta, full-time faculty at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Of course.
A lot of times students seem to get caught up in the delivery instead of just focusing on content. Like a lot of times they'll be thinking about, oh my gosh, how do I look? Are my hands shaking? And the truth is, we can't even see that their hands shaking most of the time. We can't even see that they feel like their face is red because the truth is, their face isn't red. The truth is, their hands aren't shaking. And a lot of those artifacts of nervousness that we often feel inside aren't actually even visible to our classmates, right?
Mhm. And so that's something I also tell them because as an instructor, I still get nervous. And before my lectures, I go up there and I'm going over my notes and making sure I have everything written down. And whenever I do go over the speaking anxiety chapter, I make sure I tell them I am nervous too. You don't feel my heart rate. My face feels hot. You don't see it. If my armpits start to get sweaty, you have no idea. And odds are, again, no one knows. And I'm glad you brought up the delivery because the biggest chunk in my rubrics, at least, are the content. So obviously, you're focused on your voice and your body and gestures and eye contact, but you're also trying to get a message across. You're trying to deliver your speech, and so I emphasize that you need to shift your focus from yourself to your audience. Do they understand what I'm saying? Can they, are they able to process my message? Does my argument make sense? Do my transition sentences actually connect my 2 points? So again, take the focus off of yourself and focus on, does my audience understand what I'm trying to say?
I like that. Uh, Focus on ourselves is often less healthy in this particular context.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I think it's useful in practicing just so that I
Hmm.
can know what I did wrong or what I need to improve or where
Yeah.
I might have misplaced a word or I might have mixed up some ideas. But when it's actually a few days before your actual speech, it becomes less productive, right?
Yeah, yeah, of course. And so that's something tell that to my students all the time: record yourself, or have someone watch you, have someone record you. Like you said, in practice is when you can focus on your voice and everything else, but in the actual speech, you want to make sure you're getting that content out there in a way that actually makes sense.
Absolutely. I wonder, do you have any stories or research that you think might help bring this idea of managing speaking anxiety instead of eliminating speaking anxiety? Because we all have speaking anxiety,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's always there. It's just, is it small or is it large? Do you
Yeah.
have any stories or research that might help bring that to life for our
I have
audience?
so many stories just because I see students all the time and I listen to about 150 speeches per semester, 200 sometimes. And so a lot of students, gosh, I don't know, it's hard to say because it varies by student, but at the very end of the class, I have my students go up. So once we finish the final speech, I have them go up one by one and talk about, okay, what do you feel now going up in the classroom, going speaking in front of the classroom? And I like for them to talk about their progress in their own eyes and like how they saw other people. And sometimes you get some students who are very, very nervous at the beginning, and towards the end they get better. And so just them being able to share that with each other really helps as well. I have stories from students completely choking at the beginning and then getting better and actually working through those nerves because, like you said, they never go away for good. And that's something I think it's important for us to know. We don't want to have unrealistic expectations of, oh, if I take this public speaking class, if I start in August, in December, that's going to be gone completely, because that is not the case, even with me and a lot of instructors. It's like you said, it either is small or it's big, depending on the setting, what you're talking about, how confident you are in that topic. And again, you just kind of learn to work through that anxiety to ride the waves, I guess, so to speak, as opposed to expecting the anxiety to leave you for good.
What are some sources you would recommend to students who want to improve their speaking, who might not have access to your communication course?
TED Talks are huge. There are so many TED Talks out there about how people manage the anxiety. Putting yourself in public speaking situations is crucial. It's kind of like riding a bike. The only way to get better is to do it. You have to put yourself out there, and again, it's uncomfortable. But for students who are not in a college classroom that don't have to give these speeches in front of an audience, you have to practice somehow. And I'd say, again, maybe think about something that you're passionate about. Maybe you want to tell your family members about an event that's happening in town. Round them up together and say, hey, let me talk to you about this real quick. I'm not sure about certain topics at family dinners because we all know how that goes sometimes, but just maybe fun, lighter topics where you actually can practice getting your what out there. And it doesn't have to be with people you don't know, because that's obviously more difficult to find a group of people you don't know that want to listen to you. But friends and family, roommates, partners, spouses, whoever you live with, it's always good to just try to bring something up to where you kind of force yourself to get out there.
I like that. I think we often emphasize practice because it really is the key to success, especially in performing a skill. We often talk about the competency ladder, right? At the very bottom, you have unconscious incompetence. You don't know that you don't know. Then a step above that, you have conscious incompetence. You know that you don't know something. Then you have conscious competence. You know that you know something. And then hopefully one day, and in some fields we might reach that point where we're unconsciously competent. We don't even realize that we know something because it's just a part of our way of being, or a part of our DNA, right? Or our social DNA, you might call it. I wonder, what are some essential approaches or essential ingredients that you recommend for students, are people who are preparing to give a big presentation? They've got a big deadline, they've got a big presentation. Are there certain things in that speaking preparation process that you think should be emphasized?
So, as far as prepping a presentation, I would say if you have the flexibility to be able to choose your own topic, choose something that you know a lot about already, or something that you are passionate about, something that you wouldn't mind learning about. That way, when you go up there to present, you are confident in that topic. So, for example, if I own two dogs and I don't have a single cat, if I have to give a speech on a cat over a dog, that's going to be more difficult. And I'm not too sure how cats live, what they require, how much they eat. I can't even tell you right now how much food a cat requires because I have two dogs. And so again, choosing that topic that you are comfortable with. And so that's for preparation of your speech. Now, before your speech, if you are given a topic where you don't have the flexibility to choose your own, practicing is so important. And I know I kind of feels like, well, I teach this, I'm supposed to tell you practice your speech, but I truly mean it. The more you practice, the better it gets. And I tell my students this all the time. You have your outline, you have your note cards, and you practice at home maybe 4 or 5 times. Once you go to class or just wherever you're going to present, if that is your sixth or seventh time reciting that speech, it's going to sound a lot better than your first time reciting that speech. So practicing is so important. Meditating is also huge if you're into self time breathing, things like that. Just taking deep breaths before and then not rushing, knowing that you have time, that you can walk up to the podium, take a deep breath, make sure everything works, and then go on. I have students all the time who will stand up from their desk to walk towards the front, and they start talking the second they stand up from their desk and start walking. Like, wait a minute, take a breath, I'm sorry, slow down, because you know that you've prepared, you've practiced, and you're ready to go come speech day.
It really makes a big difference.
Hmm.
It's amazing how much psychology, educational psychology, psychology, and self-care goes into preparing for an event like giving a speech.
Hmm.
I I know that a lot of students struggle to use the visualization principles, right?
Yeah.
They might not believe in that. They might, oh, that might work for other people. It doesn't necessarily work for me.
Yeah.
But I know that, for, at least for my students, visualization and imagining yourself doing well in the actual graded final speech, or at the actual presentation in front of your boss and your colleagues, that can make a huge difference.
Yes.
Just the act of going through, taking the time to put it in your mind that you are going to be successful, right? And
Hmm.
defining what that looks like and how that sounds and how that feels can make a
Yeah.
huge difference too. Are there any other
Exactly.
strategies or techniques like that that come to mind whenever you think about how to help people manage speaking anxiety for better?
Yes. So you've heard the phrase fake it till you make it? That's huge. That's so big. And that kind of brings me back to when I took one of my very first public speaking classes. For some reason, I felt like I was not going to struggle with public speaking. I was like, oh, this is fine. I'm comfortable. I'm okay. The second I got up there and I had 20 sets of eyes looking at me, I said, shoot, this is way more daunting than I thought. And so after that, I told myself, I like public speaking. I like it. I enjoy it. And that was a huge lie back then. And I just kept telling myself that I like it and it's going to be fine and I'm great. I am clear. I articulate my words. I am loud, and just that positive visualization. Like you said, it can sound silly to just tell yourself, it's going to be fine when you're a ball of nerves, but that truly goes a long way, and just faking it till you make it is huge. It also kind of takes me back to when I first started teaching. My very first course I taught was public speaking, and I was a TA2, so I was, I think, in my second semester or second year, I'm sorry, of grad school, and I was feeling all kinds of nervous. My class was a very small class. It was a summer course. I think I had 8 students, and I was so nervous. I was like, I don't know if students are going to believe what I'm saying. They're going to know that I'm so nervous. And again, that positive visualization, going over my lectures at home, telling myself I know what I'm talking about. I am not nervous. I'm gonna be fine. Really got me through, and is what has gotten me to where I'm at right now. I'm perfectly comfortable speaking in front of an audience or lecturing, but it wasn't always that way. So I had to kind of talk my way through that.
Yeah, it's wonderful that you acknowledge that vulnerability because I think that a lot of people don't necessarily talk about that.
Yeah.
We often see graduate students and faculty struggle with imposter syndrome even when they're at the top
Hmm.
of their game and they're at the
Gosh,
top of
yes.
their teaching career, they're their top of their research portfolio. And it sounds like there was a little bit of imposter syndrome that first class. Whenever you
Big
stepped into
time.
that classroom for the very first
Yes.
time, did you feel that way or
Yes, and I still do sometimes. And again, that's part of the vulnerability, and it's part of, I don't know, I was in my second year, like I said, second year grad school, and I had never even considered teaching. It was just kind of fell into my lap, and so I took on the opportunity, and I taught that first course. And towards the end of the semester, I was thinking, what am I doing? Like, I am not qualified to teach this. Why am I teaching students that are only 5 years younger than I am, things like that. And I was so in my head. And so I really had to dig myself out of that hole. And again, just positive visualization, talking to myself, telling myself, I know this. I can do it. I'm good at this. I am made for this. And like I said, it happens to this day. And I often feel like, do I belong here? Did they really mean to offer me this position? Am I qualified to be teaching? And it happens all the time. But just telling myself, I am enough, and faking it till I make it. Really,
yeah. And I know that students appreciate whenever you share that too, because it again makes it a more comfortable environment to have to give
yeah.
a speech in, especially since it's a part of the grade, right? To say, hey, everybody
Mm-hmm.
feels these feelings.
Yeah.
Everybody gets those sorts of ideas in their head,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're starting or they've been teaching for 20 years.
Yeah.
Those sorts of feelings, they can come back just as easily as that first day.
Mm-hmm. And I know sometimes I even before I started teaching, I went to shadow some professors, or just to observe and see how they were doing. And I remember sitting in the back of their classrooms and thinking, man, I wonder if they're not nervous. I wonder if they truly feel perfectly fine. Or I wish I would have asked, like, how do you feel after giving that lecture? What are your feelings before you actually open up your lecture? Because I think those things are really important to talk about, especially for people who might, I don't know, feel like they're taking up where spaces that are not meant for them.
Ooh, that was interesting. Spaces that were not meant for them.
It's a
Tell
whole
me more
nother can
about
of
that.
worms.
No, no, but I love that
Oh
because
gosh.
because that tension, so many people feel that tension.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about spaces that are not meant for people for or maybe certain kind of people?
Yes. So I grew up in a very small border town where education was emphasized, but it wasn't really pushed. My I was expected to go to college, but not all the way. I remember my after I graduated with my bachelor's, I told my parents I'm going to go back to school, and my dad was like, "Why are you going back to school? Like, what are you doing in school for 6 years?" And so, anyway, getting over that first struggle, right? I want to get a master's degree, and then I did. And I see a lot of my colleagues, and not all of them, but you have professors with PhDs who've been doing this for 20, 30 years, and they have full on dissertations and they have crazy research portfolios. And sometimes, again, it goes back to that imposter syndrome. And I remember when I first got offered this full time lecture, I came home and I told my husband, like, is this real life? Like, is this space meant for me? I have a master's degree. I have 4 years of experience. I teach the lower level courses, and barely started teaching upper division. And I struggle sometimes with, do I belong in this space? Is this space for someone? Little me from Laredo, Texas is just, again, a little border town. And I don't know. It's just lots to think about.
I'm sure there's a lot of people who feel that way.
Yeah.
And seeing that you have been able to overcome those feelings and see the truth that you do belong in a
Yeah.
faculty position
Yeah.
at a major university, I think that that is an inspiring thing. And the
Hmm.
more you're able to tell that story, the more I think people will realize that there's no place or space that is not meant for them.
Yeah, of course, and it's a mental game. I feel like for the most part, because again, it does go back to imposter syndrome. But believing in yourself and knowing that you are qualified to teach, and that I remember telling my husband for the very first time, or when I first taught interpersonal speaking, not interpersonal speaking. I'm sorry, interpersonal communication, back in Colorado. The department chair really trusted me with that class, and it's what I really enjoy learning about, reading about, teaching. And when I first took on that course, I was thinking, wow, am I really supposed to be teaching interpersonal communication? But I am, and it's just taken a long time for me to actually feel comfortable with what I'm doing, and I really enjoy it. And so I have to kind of work through those mental hurdles.
Jessica, thank you so much for sharing that. I wonder what's the most important piece of advice that you could give someone who's struggling with managing their speaking anxiety?
Biggest piece of advice is to practice. And I've said this over and over in this episode, and I will continue to say it. Practicing is so important. It is really the only way to get out there. I mean, you have to try. You have to keep practicing in order to get better. And then, like I've said before, positive visualization, that is huge. And even if you've never done it before, give it a try. You would be surprised how powerful the mind is.
I love that. How, you'd be surprised how powerful the mind is. It reminds me of systematic desensitization, right? That
Mhm.
idea of
Yeah.
exposing people to the thing that they're afraid of or the thing that they
Yes.
fear over and over again. And it sounds great, but whenever I think about being exposed to snakes over and over again, that does not sound like
No
a good idea
thanks.
or fun or
Yeah.
healthy. What might you say to someone who says, no, thank you. I think I'll just not do that anymore, right? How do you convince them that this kind of systematic desensitization or the idea of practicing over and over again, how do you convince them to do that kind of hard work in front
Mhm.
of people so that their anxiety and their stress levels lower?
So knowing that it's going to be worth it. I feel like at one point in our lives, I mean, at one point or another, we are somehow get stuck in a situation where we are speaking in public, and it's just a really great skill to have, no matter what career field you fall into. Having that skill of public speaking is incredibly important. And I feel like it's best to kind of practice now, get yourself through it, as opposed to just kind of sweeping it under the rug and never dealing with it because it's daunting. And then being put in that situation where you don't have a choice and thinking, crap, I never practiced this and I have no idea. So I think knowing that it's going to help you in the future, one way or another, it's worth it.
I wonder what's the most important action people should take today to develop this presentational speaking ability? Obviously, we've talked about practicing, and
Hmm.
practicing is important, but
Yeah.
is there another action that is so important they should do it today to be able to present well for that presentation that they might have to give in the future?
Yeah, putting yourself out there, really kind of forcing yourself to, hey, I'm gonna have to do this, like I just mentioned at some point or another. So forcing yourself, and again, this goes back to the whole conversation we had of having a safe environment before pushing yourself. And this is why I tell students, practice in front of people you're comfortable with, so you know that they're going to be welcoming, they're going to be friendly, and of course you'll have friends that might roast you, might kind of make poke jokes here and there, but it's probably lighthearted stuff. So again, force yourself to get out there is just a great way to practice and take action with when it comes to speaking in I'm sorry, public speaking anxiety.
Cool. Jessica, thank you again so much for taking the time to speak with us today. We appreciate you, and especially your stories and your vulnerability, and giving the advice that you gave that is going to help a lot of people. Thank you.
You're very welcome. It was lots of fun to talk to you.